Hi, this is Devony Morgan, and you're listening to The Spirit of Now. Today we're talking to our guest, Pam Muller, about her upcoming workshop on building your practice as a spiritual director. Pam, also known as Sweet Georgia Pam, is a trained spiritual director, author, and dream expert with a professional background in education. Her focus is on guiding people toward increased spiritual and emotional well-being. She's an experienced presenter, writer, curriculum designer, group leader, coach, guide, mentor, and entertainer. Her natural gifts for empathy, understanding, compassion, and nurturing are palpable, hence the sweet title in her brand. Our interview was COVID safe and conducted over Zoom, so apologies for the audio quality, but you're gonna love it anyway. So Pam, welcome to The Spirit of Now. Obviously, you're very familiar with what we do here as the president of our board and a very popular spiritual director here in Atlanta. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about what we're going to be doing with the workshops that we're offering. So my first question is, what is spiritual direction? Help people click in with that and make sure that we know what we're talking about here.
That's a good start. So spiritual direction, there's this learning curve with it because people have sort of a traditional understanding that spiritual direction might exist inside a faith tradition. People tend to go to a minister, and then the minister introduces them to spiritual direction, and then they are confused by, aren't you the spiritual director? And it turns out that spiritual direction is its own separate profession that is ancient and has its roots, all the way back. And it's basically sitting and holding presence for people to let them wrestle with the big questions about their relationship with the divine. In today's world, I tend to describe it as, the closest thing that we associate it with is life coaching, but with a very deep spiritual anchor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you had mentioned it coming out of faith traditions. Mm-hmm. Does it need to be tied to a faith tradition?
Well, I think that it can be interfaith, and with so many people that are now defining themselves as spiritual but not religious, that actually they're anchoring into the spiritual conversation, but they want to have the discussion outside of the confines of doctrine. And so a spiritual director who is an interfaith or an interspiritual spiritual director can hold the space without having that doctrine as judgment. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be anchored inside of a faith, but it's important because the people come wanting something to believe in.
Yeah. So with our workshop, what we're talking about is if you yourself are a spiritual director or some other sort of soul worker, can we say that? People who are doing something that involves those depths. You, as a very successful spiritual director, are going to help them build this practice for themselves. So my question is, do you consider spiritual direction a business or a ministry?
Oh, it's such a rich question. It's such a good, because it tends to be that people who are driven to the spiritual practices, if I'm a spiritual practitioner or a spiritual director, I'm driven to the deep inner work, but in order to make a difference, I've got to set up some structure in order to be able to serve the people I'm trying to serve. And that's where the business aspect comes in. So we kind of need to merge the ministry and the business together in order to really effectively reach the people that are out there that need my particular voice or my particular spiritual direction help. If I'm going to reach those people, I've got to have a practical structure set up. And that's where the business side comes in.
What should we expect to learn?
So we're going to go through kind of three components throughout the course of the workshop. We're going to cover the basics. like setting up your entity and how to do the admin stuff. And then we're going to talk through a little bit about branding, how to create and hone your voice, where you're, all the different social media things that you can. We're gonna like cut through all the weeds that are out there and get to some real practical applications for social media. And then we're going to talk a little bit about this transitioning time that we're in, because this is a time when people really need our particular gifts to be available. And that structure, getting that structure set up, is the key to making sure that we can reach the people we're trying to reach. So there's an analogy of a river. And I was thinking about, a river, in order to create the flow of the water, has to have two banks. There has to be two banks in order to make the water move and flow. And so on the one bank, us creatives tend to lean into our own personal training. We tend to want to go into our ongoing growth and our personal shadow work, and we learn a lot of life lessons in that on that one side of the bank. But if we don't do the practical setting up of the business, which feels like the shallow side of the bank, the other side of the river, we don't like to operate on that shallow side. But if we don't set those things up, the water is not going to be flowing. The people, the customers, are not going to come through our doors. Yeah. If all we do is sink into our own personal development, that's not going to help us help the world the way that we're compelled to. So what we're getting into in my workshop is the other side, the other bank of the river, the shallow stuff, and why it's not actually shallow.
Well, that was going to be my next question is, but come on, Pam. I mean, I'm a creative. I don't want to do that stuff. Like, please tell me it'll be somewhat interesting. Will it be motivating? Am I going to walk away with my little Enneagram 4 senses tingling?
Yeah. So this is the brilliance of this is why I'm so excited to offer it. It is because I did all of that. I was so resistant when I graduated from my training program to the like, oh my gosh, a quarterly tax return. Like what? How can I not have to do that? Like, can somebody else please just take that for me? Like those things that I was so resistant to, I had to figure out. And so now that I've figured those out, I'm like, oh my gosh, people need to know this is all you have to do. All you have to do is this. So I'm going to spell it out for you. Not necessarily a step by step, because, there's a million different ways to build a business. But I'm going to spell out for you what I did, so that if you don't want to get lost in the rabbit hole of doing your own research, you can just copy, just beg, borrow, and steal, right? You can just look at, here are the things that I did. Just start there.
I love it.
Yeah.
It feels like you're going to hold our hands through this. I like that.
That's right. I'm going to hold space while you wrestle with building your business. I'm going to be your spiritual director through the process.
I love it. Tell us about, just so we can kind of get to know you a little bit more, tell us about a struggle you've had as a spiritual director.
Oh, what a beautiful question. There are so many. Yeah, I think my initial struggle, I'll start there. When I was in my training for spiritual direction, I was like this really excited student. I was like, yes, this is going to be amazing. I want to do it like this person. And I had my mentors and the people that I admired. But once I stepped away from the training program, there was this big gap, and I felt very alone. Because suddenly I didn't have this structure that I had in the learning. The learning was, read these books, meet with these people, have this. I had things on my calendar, right? And then suddenly there was this like coming out of the rapids and into like this pool of water that wasn't moving. And I'm like, oh, I have to generate the current here. That was a real uphill struggle for me. And what I found was that in the struggle, I was kind of grasping and trying to, like, maybe I can network this way, or maybe I can do this, or maybe this is my own. And I just was trying things. And how do I say this? It's like the fruits of the labor came later. And suddenly, a few months down the road, things were just easier without me noticing it. Because I had been doing the inner work, I had been paying attention and struggling and like trying this, that, and the other. And some of those things just started working a little bit. And that created a little bit of movement for me.
I think that's really good to know, right? For people first starting out, graduates from training programs, or, as people are new to this, or any creative endeavor, right? And I think maybe during the pandemic, we might see a lot of people switching careers, trying to start something new. Maybe that creative project that's in the process of growing. And so I'm really, really glad that you're here as a mentor for everybody. So this question is, you had alluded to this earlier, and so I just want to give you the space to expand on that. Why do you think spiritual direction is so critical during the time we're in? And as we are recording this, it's July 2020. The reality is starting to sink in that the pandemic is not going away quickly and easily, and we're all in a place of shift.
Mm-hmm.
So why is spiritual direction important right now?
First of all, it is so critical right now. It is really imperative that if you are a professional practitioner and able to hold space for people to work through their own stuff, that you get out there and do that, and you make yourself available. So the timing of this workshop and setting up the business structure so that you can have a few boundaries for yourself and be available to be as helpful as possible. The timing is really important. But the reason that the timing is really important is because people need a place to feel emotionally safe to be vulnerable right now. Mm-hmm. Telling our own stories is how we start the healing process within ourselves. And people need a safe place to tell their stories. Mm-hmm. And spiritual direction, we've been focused on spiritual directors, but of course we're talking about spiritually grounded individuals or spiritual practitioners or healers who are capable and trained to do that, to hold that space and let people start their own healing process, are like first responders on the emotional level right now. As the shadow work comes to the surface for people, because we're all being faced with our own shadows right now, they're going to be searching for, where can I safely explore this? Where can I safely unpack these things?
And we create that space.
We create that space. Right. And the structure of a business gives you, as the practitioner, some boundaries to do that in, so that it sort of sets up a safety net for you as well as a practitioner. So it is really important to go through the process that seems really boring and uninteresting of doing the practical structure of a business.
Yeah. Well, I am excited to bring people together to learn from you, Pam, about how this works. Obviously, you have the expertise on what you call the shallow side, but you also just have such a wonderful energy, and you're such an amazing teacher. I'm just so proud to have you be a part of our program. And so I really invite people, whether you're a spiritual director or doing some other kind of depth work, healing work, spiritual practitioner, that we want you to feel welcome to attend and learn from Pam. So thanks again for your time today, Pam. And
thank you so much. Yeah,
we are excited about seeing you in that context. Thanks.
Perfect.